Darren's British motorcycling journalist and intrepid bike tester prepares himself for combat. Gary Peterson dons some protective kit for a day of exploration on two wheels. These motorcycles are the kings of the jungle. They are the pinnacle of technical advancement at the end of the 20th century and have set the standard for the beginning of this century. The Kawasaki ZX-R and the Suzuki Hayabusa have both rapidly developed reputations of being right at the top of the food chain in terms of engine performance and high-speed prowess. Out past the Val Dam, and we begin our shootout of these two giants in motorcycling. Which one is the ultimate hyper sports bike? Well, as you can see, we are about to find out. Spectacular stuff. But of course, this is not only a test about top speed, but more of an overall shootout where handling, brakes, suspension and general feeling is taken into account. Technically, both the Suzuki and the Kawasaki are incredibly advanced, with technical innovations that simply lift the boundaries to another level. Talk about lifting it to another level. Both machines have onboard computers with larger memory than the Apollo spaceship had when man first landed on the moon. Quite incredible. In fact, the secret to the immense power output of both of these road burners is the intricate engine management systems, which allow optimum performance from the high compression 4-cylinder motors. Big horsepower for big badass motorcycles. Top speed, well, the speedos are around about 340, but actual speed 308 k's per hour. In fact, there's so little in it on the top speed run, the Suzuki gets the toe and almost comes by the Kawasaki as they flash past us at over 300. On the dyno, the Suzuki tops out at 152 brake horsepower and the Kawasaki tops that with 158 horses. But where the Suzuki really scores is in the mid-range with an arm-wrenching 133 Newton meters of torque compared to the 128 produced by the ZX-R. Right, time to swap motorcycles.
Yes, man. Gotta go on this, Gary, mate. This is sorted. Well, when you've been riding that, mate, I'll have to blow the cobwebs out of it. You ready, man? Yep. Yeah.
What is this world coming to? Sorted motorcycles and maniacs aboard them. Great terrain to test these bikes. Just take a look at that view. Mind you, the road surface doesn't look quite good enough for high-speed stuff. Perhaps it's time to get to the racetrack and see what these bikes can really do. Talking about power though, the ZX-12's power is much more up around the top end and revs almost 2,000 revs higher than the Hayabusa. This is almost certainly attributed to the difference in capacity. 1300 cc's for the Suzuki and 1200 cc's for the Kawasaki's. Time for a top speed run, and they come down towards the camera at about 280 and accelerating. Over the crest and on the pipe. Gary on the Kawasaki and Matt on the Suzuki. Speedo buried down around the 340 mark, and they come past the camera side by side. 2 k's per hour. That's the difference at this sort of speed. Enough of that. Get a lot of this. 220, 230, 240, all the way up to 250. A bit of a wobbler, and Matt really does appreciate that one. But of course, it's not all about wheelies and burnouts. In fact, it's about overall feeling, handling, brakes, stability. That's really what does count in the world of hyper sports bikes. Now, these behemoths aren't really suited to track work, but this is the ultimate test in terms of handling, brakes, and suspension. We know they make big, bad horsepower. And in fact, the Suzuki back tire is almost worn out after just one day of high-speed thrashing. Down the straightaway, and there's absolutely nothing in it. On the brakes, the Suzuki able to brake a bit later thanks to some better brakes, but Gary can't resist showing off for our cameras. Matt runs inside him and Gary gets out of the seat on the big Suzuki. That rear tire really has cried enough. Rear tire on both bikes, by the way, a 200/17. Huge rubber, coping with huge horsepower. On the brakes, well, the front end dives, they're not really made for this. But with a bit of setting up and tuning, well, who knows, these could be the super bikes for the tracks of the future. Suzuki, 2,000 revs lower as they come out of the turns, but able to put that power down, laying big black darkies out on the racetrack. Time for our pilots to change motorcycles. Matt gets onto the Suzuki and Gary climbs aboard the Kawasaki ZX-12. And this is what it's like on board with Matt Durrans as you come onto the straight at the Midval racetrack. And Gary sneaks past out of the slipstream and goes ahead on the Kawasaki as they jump up and put the brakes on. That Kawasaki does look like it's easier to tip into the corners thanks to a half a degree less steering angle compared to the Suzuki. While Gary's busy pulling a wheelie, Matt managed to get past on that Suzuki and winds it up. 152 horses going down to the back tire. The Suzuki is somewhat deceiving. It looks a lot bigger than the Kawasaki, yet around the track it feels almost nimble and much more neutral as we go through the corners, flicking it right and of course left. It all comes down to who's got the biggest you-know-whats when it comes to riding these motorcycles. He with the strongest right wrist normally wins. Right, time for the drag show. No, we're not dressed in ladies' clothing. In fact, these are wolves dressed in wolves' clothing.